Hi class, this is the intro assignment YouTube tutorial for CMTC 275, HTML and CSS. And in this tutorial what we're going to be doing is walking through the steps that you're going to need to take to set up the development environment that we're going to be using throughout the course. And then once we get the development environment set up, we're going to create a small website using that development environment. So, our development environment is pretty interesting. The actual software application that we're going to be using to create our website is called NetBeans, and it's a very powerful software application. I think you guys are going to enjoy using it. But in order for it to be fully functional, we first have to install a Java development kit. So that's the very first thing we're going to install, and then we're going to install NetBeans. The last thing that we're going to install as part of our development environment is actually an extension for Google Chrome. By the way, Google Chrome is going to be the main browser that we're going to be using to display our websites. But we're going to install an extension to Google Chrome that's going to allow us to connect to it from within NetBeans. Okay, so 3 different pieces of software we'll be installing. First, we'll be installing the Java Development Kit. We'll be going out to this Oracle website in order to install it. Then we're going to go out to the NetBeans website. We're going to install NetBeans. And then the last thing we're going to install is this Google Chrome extension. Okay, now an assumption that I'm making coming into this YouTube tutorial is that you have already installed Google Chrome. Again, that's going to be our main web browser. I'm going to assume you've already installed Mozilla Firefox and you've already installed IE. If those assumptions are not correct, then stop the tutorial right now and go out and install those 3 browsers. I'm not going to walk through the steps involved in installing all of those browsers, but we're going to be using them. You're going to have them installed on your laptops. Okay, so now assuming you have these 3 browsers installed, the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to go out to that Oracle website that I showed you the URL before. And by the way, I will provide you with all of these URLs. Okay, but we're going to start off by going out to this Oracle website and we're going to download the Java Development Kit. Again, we need the Java Development Kit in order for NetBeans to function properly. So to kick off the process, you're going to push this Java button, and that's going to take you to a page where at the top it says Java SE Development Kit 8 Downloads. Okay, you're going to scroll down a bit, you're going to accept the license agreement, and then what you're going to do is you're going to download the install executable for the Java Development Kit. You're going to have to pick the appropriate one based upon the operating system that's running on your laptop. I'm running Windows 64-bit, so I'm going to download that install executable. And the download is going to take a minute or 2, so be patient. And while the JDK install executable is actually downloading, I'm going to mention that a little bit later on in this YouTube tutorial, I'm going to be asking you to take screenshots of what you're doing. So what you're going to want to do at those points is take the requested screenshot, save that screenshot somewhere in a Word document or maybe in a PowerPoint presentation, and then come back to the tutorial and continue on. And pay close attention for the different spots where I'm asking you to create screenshots, because that's going to be one of your deliverables as part of this assignment. You're going to have to submit all of those different screenshots that I request. Okay, so the Java Development Kit install executable has downloaded. So I'm going to go out to my downloads directory. Okay, and there is the install executable, JDK-8 update 11-Windows-x64.exe. I'm going to double click on that file. I'm going to run the install executable. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to go through a series of screens where I'm simply going to push on the next button. I'm not going to make any changes to the default configurations or settings that are offered. I'm simply going to push on the next button through a series of screens. And this is going to take a minute or 2 as well. Okay, now as soon as I push the close button, I should have the Java Development Kit installed, and I can verify that by going out to my control panel, opening it up, going into the programs and features. Okay, and then the programs that I want to look for are there, the Java 8 Update 11 program, and then down a little bit, the Java SE Development Kit 8 Update 11. Okay, both 64-bit, both of them are there. That means I've installed the Java Development Kit. That's the first piece of software. Now, the second software that I'm going to be installing is the actual NetBeans Integrated Development Environment. Remember, that's the application that we're going to be using to actually create our websites. Okay, so you're going to go out to www.netbeans.org. You're going to push the download button. Okay, and we're actually not going to use the latest and greatest version of NetBeans, which by the way is 8.0. We're going to use a previous version. We're going to use the 7.4 version. Okay, and the reason why we're going to use the 7.4 version is I uncovered a little bug in the 8.0 version that makes it a little more difficult for us to do some cool development things in the application, some cool web development things. So we're going to use a previous version. We're going to use the 7.4 version. Okay. Now you notice on this page there are 5 different bundles of the NetBeans IDE you can download, and each of the bundles supports different technologies. Okay. I'm going to ask you to download and install the bundle that supports all of the different technologies. Okay. So you're going to push that download button, and that again is going to download and install executable, this time though for NetBeans. And the download is going to take a few minutes as well. And by the way, while the NetBeans install executable is downloading, I'll just quickly show you. Here is the website to where you can go to download and install Chrome. And here is the website where you can go to download and install Firefox. And here is the website where you can go to download and install IE. I'm assuming probably almost everyone has IE installed, but you all may not have Firefox and Google Chrome. And again, Google Chrome is the key one. That's the one that we're going to be using sort of as our default browser. So you want to make sure that you have that browser installed before you really dig into this tutorial. But it looks like the NetBeans install executable is downloaded. So I'm going to go out to my downloads directory. And there's the NetBeans install executable, netbeans-7.4-windows.exe. So again, I'm going to double click on that install executable. I'm going to start it up. I'm going to run it. And again, this is going to take me through a series of screens where I'm really going to do nothing more than push the next button. I'm not going to change any of the default settings or any of the default configurations. I'm simply going to next, next, next through all the screens. There are some screens where I will have to accept license disclosures. I'm going to accept those and then just simply push on the next button. And this install is going to take a little bit longer than the install of the Java Development Kit. So hang in there, be patient, and as soon as we have NetBeans installed, then we can get into the interesting stuff and we can actually do our website development. Okay, so you can see that the install of NetBeans took a fair amount of time, but don't panic if it does. That's normal. The one thing I am going to do before we finish the installation is I'm going to uncheck this checkbox. It says contribute to the NetBeans project by providing anonymous usage data. And then I'm going to finish the install. And at this point, we have NetBeans installed too. Okay, and you should see on your desktop a NetBeans IDE icon. It should say NetBeans IDE 7.4. So we're going to start NetBeans up. And again, this is the application day in, day out that we're going to be using to create our website. So double click on that desktop icon and NetBeans is going to start up. And it takes a little while for all of the modules to load and for NetBeans to start up. So don't panic there either if it takes a little while. That's normal. That's part of the process. But eventually it will start up, and you will see the integrated development environment that you're going to be using for the development of your websites in this course. And it may not look exactly like what you see on my screen right now, but again, don't panic. We're going to make changes to the configuration of the IDE so that you have all of the appropriate windows open that you're going to need to develop websites. Give it just 1 or 2 more seconds so that it's done loading, okay, before we begin, and then we'll get started. You can see down in the lower right hand corner it says that background scanning is taking place, background scanning of projects. Okay, so I'm going to let that finish before we get started. And this is normal. This is all part of the process. You may not see all of this when you start up NetBeans for the first time, but after you've used it for a while and you've created some web applications, you probably will notice this little bit of lag, this little bit of delay. Okay, so it appears to me now that NetBeans has fully started up, that all of the modules have loaded, okay, everything is configured, and more or less this is what the IDE looks like, okay. A series of windows. We're going to be using different windows for development purposes, and let's talk through those first of all. And if you don't see all of these windows off the bat, that's fine, we can open them up, but I want to make sure that by the end of this tutorial you have your IDE set up so that you'll be able to develop web applications. So starting off in the upper left hand corner, there's a window that says projects, okay, and you're definitely going to be using this window for your web development. It's going to list all of your HTML applications, and that's sort of what I'm clicking on right now. Okay, these are HTML5 applications with a bunch of XHTML files included in them. Okay, so you're going to be using this projects window so that you can access the files in your website, okay, and create web applications. If you don't see that particular window, don't panic, okay, because at the top of the IDE in the menu bar there is a drop down option for window. You select that drop down option, and from within that drop down there is an option for projects. You can click on that and it will open up the projects window. Now if you already have the projects window open, or if you just opened it, you're not going to see this big huge listing of projects that you can see in my window right now. And you shouldn't, because you haven't created any projects yet. You haven't created any web applications. That's okay. You're going to be creating one in just a few moments, so you will see something over there. If you don't see anything, that's fine, but you should have this projects window open. There's another window called services. We're really not going to be using the services window, so if you want to, if you see it, you can close it. We are sometimes going to be using the files window. Again, it gives you a view of your web applications and the files that are contained within them. So we are going to be using that. If you don't see it, okay, in your IDE, again, you can go up to window and then select files, and it should open for you. Okay. Below that there is a navigator window, and by the way, all of these windows, they resize. They can get bigger, they can get smaller. You can make them whatever size is optimum for you. This is really the configuration that I like to use, but if you like to make things bigger or smaller, you can definitely do that by resizing the windows. We will be using the navigator. Okay, so you should open that window. If you don't see it, again, go up to the window drop down option and select Navigator. Okay, we're not really going to be using the output window, so if you do see the output window, you can close that. If you don't see that, that's fine, you don't want to open it. Okay, you probably do not see, this is the code editor. As a matter of fact, this is an XHTML file. You probably don't see that yet. You probably see a large gray area in the right-hand side of the IDE, and that's fine. Or you might see a startup screen, and if you see a startup screen, that's fine too. You can leave that there. You don't have to close it. But you most probably do not see code in the code editor, at least at this point. In just a few minutes, we're going to begin the process of creating an HTML5 application, and we're going to be adding XHTML files to it, and then you're going to see some code over in the code editor. But for now, you probably don't see that, and that's okay. Probably what you do see is a large gray area, grayed out area, or possibly you see a startup screen that has some information about NetBeans. The last window, we're not going to open this window up just yet, is this palette over here on the right hand side of the IDE. In just a few minutes, we're going to open that up for you guys. Okay, but those are the windows that we're going to be using. We're going to be using the projects window, the files window, the navigator. We're going to be using the code editor. Okay, and you're also going to be using this palette window. Okay, so those are the windows you'll be using. Okay, now what we're going to do is we are going to create an HTML5 application. It's a web application. Okay, so to start off that whole process, what you do is you go up to the menu bar at the top of the IDE and you select the file drop down option. Okay, and from within that drop down there is an option for new project. Okay, you want to select that. Okay, and then the new project window is going to open up. In this window, underneath of categories, you want to make sure that HTML5 is selected. Okay, and then underneath of projects, you want to make sure that HTML5 application is selected. Okay, so underneath of categories, you're going to select HTML5, and underneath of projects, you're going to select HTML5 application, and then you're going to push on next. Okay, and then you're going to name your project. Okay, at the top of this particular window that we're looking at right now, you're going to give your project a name, and I usually leave HTML5 application there, and then I'll type in a dash, and then I'll give the project a unique name, like for example, intro assignment. Okay, so if you want, you can name your project that HTML5 application dash intro assignment. Then you're going to push on the next button, and in this next screen you're not going to do anything, you're just going to push the next button again, and then in this last screen you're not going to do anything either, you're just going to push the finish button. Okay, and then behind the scenes what NetBeans is doing is it's creating an HTML5 application for you, and it's also generating some files for you. What it's generating is an index.html file. Okay, and it actually also generated this folder called the site root folder. All of your XHTML files are going to be contained within this site root folder. Okay, but because you've created an HTML5 application, what NetBeans does is it creates an HTML file for us, and it includes it in the site root folder. Well, we don't want to work with HTML files. Okay, we're not going to be working with HTML files. What we're going to be working with are XHTML files. Okay, XHTML has all of the latest, whistles and enhancements and features of HTML. So that's what we want to use. Okay. But by the way, I do want to mention at this point, you should see over on the right hand side of the IDE the palette window. It should have started up for you, but if it didn't, that's okay. You can open it again by going up to the window drop down at the top of the IDE, then selecting IDE tools, and then selecting palette. Okay, so at this point you should see all of the windows that you're going to be using for your website development. Again, the projects window, the files window, the navigator, okay? In the code editor, you should now see this index.html file, okay? And there's actually some HTML included in it at this point. And then on the right-hand side of the IDE, you should see this palette window. And you should see something that says HTML and HTML forms, and there's a bunch of buttons, and we'll talk about those throughout the course, and we'll even use one of them in just a couple of minutes, okay? But I'm going to continue on with the development of our web application here. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I told you we're not going to be using HTML files in this course. We're going to be using XHTML files. So what we want to do is we want to add an XHTML file to our site root folder. Okay, to do that, what you do is you select the site root folder, you highlight it so that it looks blue. Okay, then you do a right click. There's a pop-up that appears. From within that pop-up, you select the new option, and then there's another pop-up that appears, and you should see an option for XHTML file if you do select it. But if you don't panic. Scroll down to the bottom of the second pop-up, and there's an option for other. Select the option for other, then go into, there's an option underneath of categories for other, and then in the file types there should be an option, and there is, for XHTML file. So under categories you select other, and under file types you select XHTML file, and then you push next, and you give your name, your HTML file, your XHTML file, a name. I'm going to leave it as new XHTML. I'm going to leave it as is for now, okay? And then we're going to push on the finish button. And now we have another file in our site root folder. We have a new XHTML.xhtml file. And that's the one that we're actually going to put some code in right now. But before we do that, what I always like to do is I like to delete the index.html file. So you can select that file so that it's blue, do a right click, and then select delete. And you can get rid of that HTML file. We're going to be using XHTML files. Okay. Now something interesting that you can do within the NetBeans IDE is you can set up templates for files. And that's what we're going to do next. We're going to set up this file as a template that we can reuse over and over and over again. But we're going to make some changes to this file before we set it up as a template. Okay. One of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to remove this comment. It spans a couple of lines. It runs from line 2 to line 6. That's a comment. That's an HTML comment. Okay. We're going to remove that for now. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Then we're going to get rid of a couple of HTML elements that we're not going to be using consistently through the course. There's an HTML meta element that you see on line 6. Okay, highlight that, select it, and remove it. We're going to get rid of that. We're not going to be using the meta element all that much in this course. Okay, and then one last element that we're going to remove, it's called the div element. It stands for division. Okay, we are going to be using the division element in this course, but we're not going to be using it in this template that we're going to be creating right now. So you can remove that. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to select, over in the projects window, we're going to select this file, new XHTML, okay? And we're going to right click, okay? And you're going to go down to the pop-up that appears to the option that says Save as Template, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to save this file as a template so that you can reuse it the next time you add an XHTML file to your project, okay? So select Save as Template, and then a window is going to pop up more or less prompting you, okay, well, where would you like to save this as a template? Okay, and we're going to save it under HTML5. Okay, we're going to save it under HTML5. Okay, and we're going to push on OK. Okay, so now this file is going to be saved as a template for us under the HTML5 category. so that on a moving forward basis, we can easily add it to any of our HTML5 applications. Okay. But now within this file, let's add some HTML. Okay, let's add some HTML and let's add some content to this HTML file. Okay, we're going to start off by adding some content to this title HTML element. The content that we're going to add. By the way, before we get started with this, I would like to ask you at this point to take a screenshot of NetBeans, okay, so that we can see that you have all of the appropriate windows open, including the palette and the navigator and the code editor, and that you have this new XHTML file that you're working on and you saved it as a template. Okay, so take a screenshot of this and save the screenshot off somewhere. Okay, but now what we're going to do is we're going to add some content to this title element. We're going to add the following content. We're going to say popular websites and then Google. Okay, so we're going to add some content to that title element. Then we're going to go down, okay, move your cursor down within the body element. Okay, for me that's down on line 8. Okay, but place your cursor in between the start tag and the end tag of the body element. Okay, so it looks something like that. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to add a division element. You're probably saying, well, why did we get rid of the division element in the first place? Well, because we're not going to be using the same division element in every single XHTML file that we create. So we didn't want to save it in that template, but we are going to use it here. So we're going to add a division element that looks sort of something like that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to type in a paragraph element. Okay, and you can see a very cool feature of NetBeans is that when you type in the start tag of an element, okay, it's automatically going to give you the closing tag for it, and all you have to do is double click on that closing tag and NetBeans will automatically complete the element for you in the code editor. Okay, so now we've added the division element, and inside of that we've added a paragraph element. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to type in some text. Okay, we're going to type in Google is best known for its search engine. Although Google now offers a number of other services. Okay, just a little bit of content in that paragraph element. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add another paragraph element. So I'm going to type in the start tag, and then I'm going to double click on the end tag that NetBeans is offering up for me. And then what I'm going to do in this paragraph element, and this is pretty interesting, what you can do, NetBeans offers a very, very quick way to drag and drop HTML elements into an XHTML file, and you can do that from this palette over here. Underneath of this category HTML, there are different buttons for table, unordered list, link, ordered list, etc. What we're going to do is we're going to push on this link button. Okay, push on the button, do a left click, and then drag the link over into your XHTML file right in that paragraph element that we created. Drag it right over there, and then this insert link window is going to pop up. Okay, and within the insert link window, what you're going to do is you're going to input some information and make some selections. Okay, so on the protocol, what you're going to do is you're going to select HTTP. Okay, in the URL, what you're going to type is www.google.com. What we're going to do is we're going to include a hyperlink to the Google website, okay, in our web page. Okay, and then the text you're going to include is click here to visit Google's website. Okay, and then you're going to push on the OK button. But before you do that, I'd like to ask you to capture a screenshot of this insert link window too. Okay, just as we have it populated right now. Capture a screenshot of that and save it off. After you've done that, push on the OK button. Okay, And you should see then within your XHTML file the following elements been generated for you. And this is a anchor element, okay, that's used for hyperlinks, okay? Excuse me. Now, to save the HTML that we've just created, real easy, go up to the menu bar at the top. There are different buttons, okay, and the button that has the little discs on it, if you place your cursor over that, it tells you that's the save button. So you want to push that button, okay? You want to save your HTML, okay? But now what we're going to do is we're going to run this website, okay? You want to make sure, okay, this is the point, if you don't have Google Chrome installed at this point, you definitely want to make sure you have it installed, okay, because what you want to do, there's a button at the top of the IDE in the menu bar, okay, that you want to push. Right now it says Chrome with NetBeans connector, okay, but what you want to do is you want to push that button and you want to make sure that Chrome is your default browser. Okay, you don't want to use IE or Firefox. You want to use Chrome as your default browser. That means when we run this web page, it's going to run inside of Chrome. Okay, so make sure you have Google Chrome installed by this point and make sure that it's set up as your default browser. Okay, and all you should have to do is select it, okay, within this little pop-up. Okay, now we're going to try to run our file. Okay, to run an XHTML file in Google Chrome, you select it over in the projects window so that it's blue. You do a right click, and from within the pop-up that appears, you click on Run File. Okay, now you're going to get this error, and I wanted you to get this error. As a matter of fact, I'd like you to take a screenshot of this error. It says Install Chrome Extension, okay, and it's telling you you're not connected. Okay, we have to go out and install the Google Chrome NetBeans connector extension before we can run any of our HTML files from within NetBeans. Okay, so to do that, it's pretty easy. We're going to push on this button that says go to the Chrome Web Store. Push on that button. It's going to take us out to Google Chrome, okay, out to the web store, and it's even going to bring up the NetBeans connector for us like this. Okay, and what you're going to do, over in the right hand side of Chrome, there's a button that says free. You're going to push that button, and what's going to happen is another pop-up is going to appear, okay, to confirm that you want to install this extension, and you can push on the add button to install it. Okay, and then you should receive a pop-up that says the NetBeans connector has been added to Chrome. Okay, and if you want, you can verify that in Chrome, Google Chrome, bring up a new tab, and on the right hand side on the button that says Customize and Control Google Chrome, select that, go down to Tools, and then to Extensions, and you should see the NetBeans connector extension listed there, and it should be enabled. Okay, so that's the third piece of software that we need to fully be able to develop and run websites using NetBeans. So now I'm going to go back to NetBeans and I'm going to say, okay, let's rerun that project again. And what's going to happen is our little web page that we created is going to come up, and you could see that happen. It came up in Google Chrome. Okay, here's the paragraph of text that we added. Google is best known for its search engine, although Google now offers a number of other services. And when you run a website from within NetBeans using the Google Chrome extension, at the top of the browser you're going to see this orange banner. It says NetBeans connector is debugging this tab. That's okay. You can leave that run. That's not an issue. Okay, but here is our hyperlink that we had created that takes us out to Google. Okay, we can go back out to the simple web page that we had created. Okay, but now you've created your first website. It's a small website, okay, but nonetheless you've created your first website. Okay, so it looks like we have some debugging features of Google, the interaction between NetBeans and Google Chrome that you can see here in the NetBeans IDE. Over here on the right you see a window that's popped up for CSS styles. If you want to, you can close that. We're not going to use that right now. And also down at the bottom, you can see that we have a network monitor that's running. And if you want to, you can close that. It's not going to hurt anything if you keep it running, because like I said before, you can resize all of these windows. Well, I'm not able to make mine smaller right now, but you should be able to resize them, make them smaller. But if you want to, you can close them too. That's not a problem. We're not going to be using them right now. Okay, we also have this browser DOM window that's open. And that's all part of the interaction of NetBeans with Google Chrome. Okay, so that's okay. Don't be alarmed if you see that. It's nothing to be alarmed about. You can close those windows if you wish. Okay. Okay, but we've created a web application inside of NetBeans. Okay, we've run the web application, okay, in NetBeans. Okay, started it up, and it actually defaulted in Google Chrome. That's where it was running. But if you want to, and as a matter of fact, I'd like you to do this, capture a screenshot of your website running in Google Chrome. Okay, then copy the URL, highlight it, and copy it, and then bring up IE. Okay, and paste that URL into IE, and you can run your website in IE too. And then bring up Firefox and paste your website URL into Firefox, and you can run it in Firefox too. And I'd actually like you to capture screenshots of your web application running in all three browsers. In Firefox, here it is running in Firefox. Okay, there's the website that we created. Okay, here it is running in IE. Okay, I want you to capture screenshots of that, and I had previously asked you to capture a screenshot of it running in Google Chrome. Okay, so 3 more screenshots. Okay, so now if we wanted to, we could add more XHTML files to this project by selecting on the site root folder, doing a right click, and then selecting new. Now this time what I want to do is I want to add that template that we created. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to select other again, and then under HTML5 categories we're going to select that new XHTML file. Okay, that's our template file. We're going to select that. We're going to push on next, and we're going to give it a name. This time we're going to change the name. Let's call it index. Okay, and then we're going to push finish. Okay, and now we have a good XHTML file that we can start off coding in. Okay, again, we could change the title. We could say more popular websites, and we could type in Firefox or something like that. And then down within the body of this HTML, we could add another paragraph. Okay, and we can add a hyperlink. Okay, but this time we'll include as our URL, okay, the URL to Firefox. Okay, which I wanted to cut and paste from here with the what is the Firefox URL? Let's see. It's not a line. It's www.firefox. It's got to be firefox.com. Right? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we'll copy that URL, and as a matter of fact, it's HTTPS. So let me go back into NetBeans, and we're going to change that to HTTPS, the protocol. Then we'll paste in our URL. I'm going to make some changes to it. www.mozilla.org, etc. And we'll say click this link to get to Mozilla. And push on OK. Okay, and it looks like we have a error here. And it looks like it doesn't like this hypertext reference. The red squiggly line that you see, and it's actually good that this happened, the red squiggly line that you see is NetBeans telling us that it doesn't like this particular URL. So let's make a change to it. Let's make a change to it. And let's see if it, yeah, it likes that a lot better. It was just some of the text in the hyperlink that it didn't like. So anyway, we've created a second XHTML file. Okay, so let's save that. Okay, and what we can do now is we can select that index.html and we can run it too. Okay, and it's going to start it up in Google Chrome too. So I'm going out to Google Chrome, and you can see here is our web page. Click this link to get to Mozilla, and hopefully it's going to work. We'll see if it works in just a minute. It did work. Okay, so we've created an HTML5 application project in NetBeans, and it's got 2 XHTML files. We've created a template that we can use, we can reuse over and over again. A couple of other things quickly I want to show you. You can see all of your HTML5 applications within the IDE, within NetBeans. You can see them over in the projects window, and you should be able to see them over in the files window too. They just have a slightly different look and feel over in the files window. Okay, here is the application that we just created, okay, with its XHTML files. Okay, and there it is in the projects window as well. All of these projects are also saved out on your laptop. Okay, and when you were installing NetBeans, if you didn't make any changes to the default settings and configurations, then all of your projects should be saved out under Documents. There should be a folder for NetBeans projects, and then within that folder are going to be all of your HTML5 applications. And if I scroll down a little bit, here's the one that we just created. Okay, you can double click on it, go into the public HTML folder, and there are your XHTML files. So you can access all of your web applications on your laptop as well as within the IDE. Okay, now one last thing that I want to show you, and this is a very neat feature, and you're going to want to use this feature for when you're submitting your web applications. And by the way, I am going to ask you to submit this web application as part of this assignment. So you're going to want to take these steps. What I want you to do when you submit it is I want you to zip it up first. I want you to include it in a zip file. And within NetBeans, you can automate that. At the top of the IDE, in the File drop-down option, there's an option for Export. Okay, and then when you select that export option, there's another option for to zip. You want to select that. Okay, and within the export project to zip window, in the build zip directory, what you want to do, what I usually do is I browse out to a folder on my laptop. Okay, usually I'll save it under my documents. Okay, you could save it if you wanted to on your C drive somewhere in a folder, but I usually save it right to my documents. And then what you want to do is you want to give the zip file a name, and I usually just name it the same as the name of the project, HTML5 application -intro assignment .zip. Okay, and you want to save that, and then you want to push on export. But before you do that, I'd like you to get a screenshot of this export projects to zip window. Take a screenshot of this, save the screenshot off, and then export the zip file. Okay, and then you have a zip file that's saved out on your computer. I have it saved under my documents. There it is, the zip file. Okay, you can double click in it, okay, into the public HTML folder, and there are your XHTML files. And you want to submit this zip file as part of your assignment. Okay, you want to submit that zip file as part of your assignment. Okay, now there are other bells and whistles and features of NetBeans that we're going to walk through together in class, but this gives you a pretty good feel of all of its features and how to develop an HTML5 application and include some XHTML files in it and how to run them. Okay, so this concludes the tutorial. I hope you found it beneficial, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your deliverables for this assignment. Thanks a lot.